red teaming.
All right. Can you guys hear me all right? Is that okay? All right. Can you guys hear me okay? In the back, I hope. I'm going to try not to slouch here. So, as was said, my name is Robert Wood. I'm going to be talking to you guys about a kind of not necessarily anything groundbreaking here, but just expanding on what a lot of existing industry approaches to red teaming is. So I am the practice director at Cigital for our red teaming assessment services. I've done all sorts of crazy security assessment stuff, like I'm sure many people in this room have done. I've worked on everything from the Nintendo Wii to Xboxes to mobile devices to web app stuff to breaking into banks, all that good stuff. So that is me. Our agenda for today, we're going to be talking about, kind of a basis. What is red teaming? How it's perceived in the industry, how I look at it, and how I would urge everyone to look at it. And we can, of course, chat about that. If anyone has any questions throughout the talk, just feel free to raise your hand and interrupt me. We will talk about point-in-time risk reliance, why that's a bad thing in a lot of current approaches. The elements of building a successful red team, whether you're bringing in somebody to do it or you're building one yourself if you're working at a large organization. Bringing software into the mix, we'll talk about why that's important, and we'll talk about the concept of continuous red teaming, what it is, why bother, that kind of stuff. So, getting started, what is red teaming really? So it's essentially, as opposed to a traditional penetration test, which everyone's familiar with penetration testing. We're going to look at a target, whether it's a web application, whether it's a mobile device, whether it's some kind of network, and we're essentially going to take that target and we're going to attempt to identify every kind of problem, every bug, every flaw, every kind of vulnerability that we can relative to that target. Red teaming, on the flip side, is a goal-based testing process. We're essentially emulating an adversary, a real-world adversary. And ideally, we want it to be more of an organizational assessment as opposed to targeting that one specific thing, be it the game console, the mobile device, whatever it is. Moving past that, we're going to be identifying how an organization responds to a simulated attack. So obviously, we're simulating what should be a real-world attack, but of course, we're controlling it in a very at least we think it's predictable manner. The organization is not going to find it so predictable. We're also going to bring in a lot of different elements of an organization into the testing picture. So how their employees fit into the organization, how their network supports different business processes, various software that they're releasing themselves and or are supporting critical portions of their business, and also physical facilities, all of that good stuff. And ultimately to essentially sum up what red teaming really is, we're going to evaluate how an adversary will actually attack any given goal. So an adversary doesn't really care about finding cross-site scripting on some website. They care about using that cross-site scripting or whatever vulnerability it is to accomplish some goal, whether it's get access to customer data, whether it's cause a denial of service condition, whether it's whatever their goal is. They care about using the vulnerability to achieve some goal. So this graphic, I hope you guys can see it okay. It kind of it's a little bit jumbled, and I apologize for that. But essentially, I'd urge you to think about a red team assessment as sitting on top of any given testing activity. So if we think of any of these silos on the bottom here as a basic testing activity, so we have some web application stuff, we've got network stuff, you've got physical facility testing, social engineering testing, and the list goes on. Essentially, you can go from a very basic type of assessment to a very advanced type of assessment in that specific target. And any of these silos might represent a penetration test on, or a security assessment going from a, maybe a vulnerability scan or an audit all the way up to a full-blown penetration test. A red team assessment is going to build on that and essentially sit on top of all these different service elements. And depending on where you're at relative to your goal, so stepping through an attack path, we may pull in different testing activities to accomplish that goal. So anyone who's ever seen a YouTube talk or a conference presentation on red teaming has probably seen this very basic Venn diagram, the electronic, social, physical Venn diagram elements of a red team. The recon and more is just kind of splashed on there because I urge everyone to kind of think beyond just doing electronic, social, physical penetration testing, because really if we just look at that stuff, all we're doing is just doing a multifaceted penetration test. So just to step through it really quickly, electronic is anything in the technical space. So we've got software, whether it's web applications or thick clients or web services. You've got network infrastructure. You've got wireless networks at physical facilities, mobile stuff. Social is any way that employees interact with an organization. So you've got attackers going after employees through using phishing techniques, calling them up, trying to get them to reset passwords or provide sensitive information, interacting with them through some kind of IM or chat feature, and then of course all the stupid stuff that people put out on social media. I'm sure we've all seen that. The physical domain is anything involving a physical facility where an organization is located. So, you've got access control technologies like the RFID badges. You've got business processes that facilitate how an employee or a vendor or a visitor might get access to the facility. What if I work for Acme Bank and I'm an employee and I show up and I forgot my badge at home that day? How do I get into work How do I get into work for the day, or do they turn me away and tell me to either go home and get it or use a sick day? And you've also got, considering how, guards work at a certain facility. Excuse me. Are they outsourced? Are they, willing and able to use force if necessary? That, all things that an attacker or security consultant is going to want to think about. So the other activities, reconnaissance is kind of the glue that holds an entire red team together. So it's important in any pen test. Getting into a red team, it becomes way more important. Essentially, with real adversary emulation, you've got attackers constantly kind of profiling your organization. Studying you, learning about you, monitoring changes, things like that. So if we want to effectively emulate them, we have to do a lot of reconnaissance ourselves. And there's a lot of good tools and frameworks and stuff out there to facilitate that. Essentially, just information to get you started. Business process analysis. So this is really looking at various processes that support an organization, whether it's how do they issue or onboard new employees? How do they do employee or employee or customer password resets? Are there strictly technical processes for doing this, or can you involve like a customer service rep? Looking at threat intelligence and threat modeling. So this is where, if we're emulating a very specific threat, be it a criminal organization or one of the hacktivist groups, or a rival competitor or a rival company, something like that, we want to look at what are their capabilities, what are their objectives, what kind of visibility do they have into the organization, and then we can kind of use all of those antecedent conditions to predict attacks. We want to also be able to use red teaming, or really any penetration testing, but specifically red teaming, given its broad scope, as a way to evaluate incident response capabilities of an organization. So not just detection, but also how they actually respond to an attack once they identify it. Risk management is not in the traditional sense that you might think about risk management. So really, this is using how an organization risk ranks different components of their organization and using it against themselves. So we'll walk through a scenario later on in the talk where we did just that. And role-based social engineering is something I'm a big advocate of, and it's essentially social engineering in the sense that we're not going to go after Joe Schmo or Mary in HR. We're going to essentially go after a role. So this ties back into the business processes. So we're going to social engineer a CSR supporting password resets, for instance. So essentially, when we're looking at that password reset process, we're going to map that out in a workflow, and we're going to identify, weakness, either weak controls or missing controls that'll essentially mean that any employee or any human sitting in that spot of the CSR may be susceptible to social engineering attacks. So putting this all together into a composite attack, I'll walk you guys through a little scenario where we were working for a defense contractor a few years back, and essentially, it was a full-blown organizational assessment. We're emulating either a terrorist group or a criminal organization that would have gone to the extent of physical access to the facilities, sophistical technical capabilities. The list goes on of the capabilities and resources that we had available to us, or that we were supposed to be emulating. So we started off, as you might imagine, doing all the external perimeter level stuff, trying to get in through the network. We did some basic phishing. Everyone was pretty well aware, so we didn't spend too much time on perimeter stuff. Phishing always, reveals some access, but we wanted to go farther than that because phishing is only so much fun. So we showed up. We did a few physical, we did some recon on their headquarters, which was up in San Francisco, and looked at a few offices that they had spread throughout the city, and we decided on one ruse that we really liked, which is where the FedEx stuff comes into play. So we essentially got one of those big Pelican cases. It was about as tall as this table, maybe like yay wide, about as deep as well. And we had one of our smaller employees get in there. We got them all dressed up with employee uniforms that we had one of our guys who didn't really care about brands and stuff and copyrights made up. So we stuck him in the box. We went, and I should have worn it, but I need to get it tailored. We went out and got FedEx shirts, and we got a bunch of magnets and stuff. Put them on custom critical FedEx division. Put them on a bunch of vans. Showed up with our handheld units, all this stuff. We wrote a little FedEx delivery app. So we show up and walk into the defense contractor's front doors, and they're like, "Oh, hey, Custom Critical. We've never ever received anything from Custom Critical. Hi, I'm a red flag." So that would have been indication number one. We also did not have any kind of designated recipient. That would have been red flag number two. However, they thought it was so cool that they were getting this massive delivery. We said, it was our instructions that you're going to get a recipient. The recipient is going to come tomorrow. You'll have keys to this to the locks, the dummy locks that are on the front of this thing. Then you should be all good to go. So they got all excited. They wheeled it in, passed all their security, brought it into a storage closet, which ironically was right next to all of their executive offices. So our employee waits like 30 minutes, and we dropped it off right at the end of the day. So everyone left, or at least all the executives left. He pops out, gets out of the storage closet, and none of the executive offices were locked because they had the eggshell approach to security. So the hard perimeter, soft GUI inside. So once we were inside the facility, you could kind of roam free. And this was only the case in their headquarters, which of course there was no network segmentation across offices, so it didn't really matter. So he pops into each of the executive offices, plugs in a bunch of the POEM plugs under each executive's desk, And so we had a team out in the parking lot who were, we started doing some network testing with this access. They didn't have any kind of controls that prevented us from getting shells, so on and so forth. So we did some scanning, didn't really reveal anything too useful, but we found one application that appeared to be homegrown because it looked like it was from the 1990s. And so we started looking at it, and there was some messaging on the front page that indicated that it was used for all their operational command and control. So essentially, this company handles kind of battlefield analytics, and so they deploy operational engineers, or they embed them into military units and throughout the world. And obviously, they don't want these people's identities known. They kind of keep that stuff under wraps. But all of it was managed right here. So this appeared to be our new high value target. So naturally, the first thing that we try on the login page was some SQL injection, and wouldn't you know it, like the basic tick or 1 = 1 on the password got us access to an account. So with that access, we were able to get covert operational employee data. They actually had some source code and stuff embedded in there that we could steal out. There was all sorts of stuff stored in this app. So, just an example of tying all of this together. And of course, they did not have any kind of monitoring controls within the facility or on their network, their internal network rather, that allowed them to detect the attacks that we were doing or respond to them. So, and of course, creating this box and getting the FedEx uniforms, all of that, it took about 2 weeks' time. And that was, with us working on other stuff and, dealing with other clients as well. So it's not like this was anything that a very sophisticated group that would go after this defense contractor wouldn't be able to do. So, and just to kind of follow up with that, with the incident response assessments. Essentially, you always want to be able to work with your client sponsor, whether it's a high level executive that knows about the red team initiative going on. You don't want to work directly with the incident response teams or the IDS and application monitoring teams, the log monitoring teams. You're essentially evaluating their effectiveness. So you don't want to tip them off that you're about to launch some big attack. You don't want to just click scan on a scanning tool and just let it go, because all that crap's easy to identify. On your end, you always want to, because a lot of this happens in production, just to kind of cover yourself and also to tie back into their detection capabilities. You always want to log all your source and target data, what kind of tests you're doing at the time. How things respond, just kind of take notes. You can do it in a nice little spreadsheet format, whatever tickles your fancy. But kind of log how things are responding to the attack. If you poke something, how does it respond? And of course the same. Yep.
Do you recommend having traffic analysis logs on that as well?
Yes. So.
Beyond just the spreadsheet?
Yeah. So I'll typically record all of my, like, if I'm running everything through a proxy, I'll save all of that on a daily basis and submit it. This is more for, like when you're doing, like looking at like some kind of business logic or something that might not be readily apparent through just proxy logs. But yeah, the more data you can gather in this and then provide at the end of the assessment to cross-reference, the better. So the shorthand is really comes in handy for physical security testing, as I'm sure you can imagine, because there's no proxy for that. And also once you're in, so once you're on the internal network, or once you've obtained access to some kind of sensitive asset and you're trying to get it out, because ultimately getting in and getting access to the asset is only half the battle. A lot of attackers need to be able to get that stuff out, data exfiltration. So you want to analyze exfiltration controls, whether they have some kind of watermarking or anything like that that might trip you up. So the existing industry approach, this is sadly what it looks like in a lot of cases. So if you go out and you're looking at YouTube talks, anything like that, a lot of it breaks down to MSF update, create some kind of loaded up PDF or something, combine that with a phishing attack, and maybe you show up on site and drop some USBs in the parking lot, and that's about it. And then they'll write up a report and say we popped some shells, we're awesome, and then they'll have their finance guy send you an invoice.
Just a quick question, and you may be answering this later, but how did your employee get out of the situation of the office?
Oh, he just walked right out. He was wearing the. So the question was, how did our little guy who we stuffed in the box get out of the office? Because he was wearing the employee uniform. It was essentially just a jacket. That was, in their case, essentially as good as a badge once you were in. So he was able to just walk out the front door and meet us at the pizza place, and we celebrated. So can anyone tell me what is wrong with this approach? Just at first glance, what would you, what pops out at you as, what comes up short?
It's siloed.
It is very siloed, very short-sighted. So essentially, beyond that, a lot of attacks today take place at the application layer. So, if you think about software and how we use software in today's world, so you've got all the Internet of Things, you've got mobile apps, you've got all this, like if you were to steal my phone, and please don't attempt to steal my phone, but if you were to steal my phone and you were to get access to any number of the passwords and stuff that may be cached, or whatever all these apps do, there's a lot of sensitive stuff that gets controlled and handled by software nowadays. So it's our banking information. You've got SQL queries kind of going into databases, fetching data, displaying it back to us. All this crazy stuff. And ultimately relying on very quick win techniques like popping a shell on some random employee's box, or getting one low-hanging fruit password from an employee in a phishing attack. That stuff doesn't really tell us much about the overall security posture of an organization. So if you've got a 50,000 employee company and I'm able to get Mary in HR's password, but I can't do anything with it, then it's not that useful from an attacker's perspective. And ultimately, that approach also doesn't really tell us how an organization responds to an attack. So, in doing these things, it's definitely an ego boost to get in and do some cool things and prove that we can steal a bunch of stuff, or break into a bank, whatever. It's cool, it's fun, but ultimately we're doing it to help make organizations more secure. Whether you're doing it internally, making yourselves more secure, proving a point, whatever. You want to be able to improve after the fact. So, and part of that, of course, is in the incident response. And also, we have no understanding with just looking at the network and social layers. We have no understanding of how an application portfolio fits together. And again, I'll get to that with the risk management scenario later. So, I won't read this to you, but this would essentially be an example of a reliance on point-in-time risk scenario that might be used in a red team assessment. So this is like the traditional approach for a lot of firms, unfortunately. So setting up a successful red team. So I mentioned earlier the threat modeling. So always consider the threat model and the threat actors when you're doing these kinds of assessments. So we do it in a lot of cases with penetration tests, but I would urge you to take it a step further. And so when you're scoping out these kinds of assessments, you don't want to just be thrashing around looking for problems, because then we shift into the world of just basic penetration testing. We want to essentially start with the assumption that we're going to emulate a very specific adversary. Again, the criminal organization, the rival company, something like that. And then we consider what that objective or what that actor's objectives are. Whether it's steal IP, whether it's steal confidential customer data, source code, whatever the case may be. We also want to map that to that specific threat actors' capabilities, and then we want to further map that to actual risks that we identify throughout the course of the red team assessment. So, having all of that stuff laid out in a matrix allows us to essentially have a little bit of traceability to identify, very high likelihood attack paths that have a very high likelihood of occurrence. So, an attacker wants to do this, they can do this, and all of these things have, we've identified all these things that could go wrong and are wrong with your organization. So given all those things, this is very likely to happen. That's essentially the idea behind it. You also always want to consider business goals and risks when doing these kinds of things. So this is a really good scoping activity to handle right up front. So, what is the business hoping to accomplish from this? What are their overarching business goals? Maybe it's provide a secure platform for, people to log in and play games, or, provide the U.S. government with the most cutting edge research, or whatever the case is. And then you want to create risks that directly impact those goals. Moving beyond that, you always want to consider the bigger picture for any risks that are involved. So this is more or less along the lines of identifying security related themes. So if I identify repeated instances of, let's say, SQL injection throughout an organization, try to think about what the impact of any given successful exploitation of that SQL injection is, how that affects the organization as a whole, and not just that one application that you're targeting. But then what are the possibilities, or what is the possibility that SQL injection, or lack of input validation, or escaping, or any other controls exists throughout the organization? So look for these themes and see if you identify a couple of issues, if you can extrapolate that and say this appears to be an issue across your entire organization, because a lot of these bigger organizations with 5,000 applications, you can have a very broad sweeping impact when you find these kinds of things. So we already kind of touched on this a little bit with the attack surface and threat analysis, so I will not drill down into this. And we also kind of did that. Sweet. Does anyone have any questions up to this point? All right, fantastic. So, bringing software into the picture. So, like I mentioned before, software is, everything happening at the application layer is really what's handling a lot of the sensitive stuff that we have going on, both as consumers and as enterprises. So whether it's SQL queries, page content that's displayed to a page, stuff on our mobile apps, and it's software not only at very high levels in the form of apps or websites or anything like that, but drilling down into the operating systems and all the way down the stack. Application portfolios at a large organization may range from anywhere from 1 to 10 using some off-the-shelf software, or it can range up to several thousand applications. So I've worked with a few large multinational banks that have like 4,000 or 5,000 applications, and it's ridiculous how much stuff they have going on, and they have no idea how to actually manage it all. It just is. It just exists in the world, and yep.
Issues with scope creep when you hit like several thousand areas in that?
So the question was, do we have issues with scope creep when we work with organizations of this size with several thousand applications? Not really. So essentially, in doing this, you don't necessarily need to test every little thing. So that's really where we benefit from missing out on the scope creep problem. If we did have to test every little thing, it could be an absolute nightmare and take years. Sad to say, but essentially with the goal-driven process, and actually we'll get into that in like 2 slides, a nice little scenario involving just a bank, or such a bank, where we were able to use several key applications to get to our goal and kind of neglect all the noise. And the last bullet on here, scanning the network with the traditional approach is not going to give you the complete picture. And on the flip side, scanning just testing just the application layer does not give you the complete picture. We really want to test that complete stack. Then we want to test the employees that support that stuff, the facilities those employees sit in, business processes they support. It's really about testing, that whole holistic picture. So the risk management portion of it. So the high risk of low risk applications. So a lot of times in these large organizations, you have assets, whether they're session cookies or credentials or whatever the case may be, some kind of process or functionality that's shared. You have these things that are shared across multiple applications. So www.acmebank.com may have the same exact credentials as marketing.acmebank.com. For whatever reason, that's just how a lot of these organizations architect themselves. Subdomains in a lot of cases provide a very, very good avenue for phishing attacks, and in particular page rewriting phishing attacks. And also cross-support customer support roles can also come in very handy in these kinds of assessments. But essentially, in going after risk management approaches, essentially what we're doing here is taking the way that an organization risk ranks their applications. So in the Acme Bank scenario, we've got www.acmebank.com may be their flagship app. That's where they put all their time, their money, their effort in securing and having all their defenses. Whereas the marketing site or the promotion site, for instance, I think it was actually promotions that we used in this particular attack. They may not provide any kind of defenses or money or resources towards defending that promotion site. But it's on the same exact top level domain. It's, handles the same kind of assets. And this next composite attack scenario essentially takes advantage of just that. So what we had here was a red team for another, it was a very large multinational bank. And we had a low-risk applications, promotions.acmebank.com, that had never gone through any kind of testing. So essentially this organization they broke their applications down into high, medium, and low-risk apps. And depending on where they got categorized, that kind of drove how much testing, so if they were a high risk app, they had to go through several stages of static analysis, and then a pen test, and then make sure any high and medium issues were remediated prior to push to production. And it was a very kind of, hands-on, detailed process to get an app into production. A medium risk app was a little lower, and a low risk app was essentially, people could just write whatever they wanted and publish it. And unfortunately, they had a lot of these things that fell into the low risk category. So this promotion site did end up falling on the subdomain of a very high profile application, their flagship app. We did look at the high risk app pretty in depth. We found some things wrong with it, but nothing kind of glaring jumped out at us. So the approach that we took, this was a full scope application or full scope red team. We didn't even have to do any physical testing because we just didn't need to in this case. So what we did was, prep for a social engineering attack. We found a whole bunch of employee names, took advantage of their mail servers. The fact that we were able to send mail from their mail servers, it didn't validate anything. So we put together a phishing attack that's taking advantage of a cross-site scripting flaw on this promotion site, and we created this bonus program. So, browse this site. We're rolling out a very kind of first stage bonus program. You, lucky employee, have been selected to participate in it. Come to our link, and you'll essentially get all the details and have a chance to enroll, where you'll have a chance to earn a 10% quarterly bonus or something like that. So in the email that we sent from from their mail server. So, all their validation there was, it bypassed all their spam filters, all that stuff. Came from an admin at acmebank.com email address. Redirected them to our promotions site, exploited the cross-site scripting, and of course, all of their session cookies and whatnot were not using, any of the HTTP only flags. They were all scoped to the parent domain, all the stuff that, would normally be ranked as probably a low or medium risk in, a very targeted assessment. And if these same things were flagged on, an assessment of just promotions, would probably have never, ever, ever been fixed, or, nobody would have even cared about it. Obviously, because the thing was never even tested in the first place. But so the cross-site scripting payload posts all of that stuff to our servers, and then rewrites the page and displays them with, kind of some info about our bonus program and a place for them to give us their domain credentials. So we captured a lot of people's domain credentials. We got probably like four or 500. I want to say a little over 500. 500 domain creds and subsequent session cookies, and we attempted to then get onto the VPN with these. So the VPN for all employees was guarded by multi-factor authentication. So we kind of hit a dead end with that. Through some other recon, we found an admin VPN, which did not, for some reason, enforce multi-factor authentication. So fortunately, some of the credentials that we ended up collecting were, did fall into the admin category. So we were able to get access to the admin network through this admin VPN with those credentials. Once we had that level of access, we found that there was a bunch of internal apps also on that same top-level acmebank.com domain. And essentially, we were able to use those session cookies to bypass internal multi-factor authentication portals and, get access to all these internal money trading and customer support type of applications. And we found that we were able to, transfer money. We were able to modify customer records, do all this crazy stuff, on their internal network, just as a matter of, attacking this low risk application and using that to kind of pivot our way through this organization. So it was kind of a bad day for them, but they learned a lot, so that's good. And of course, throughout that entire thing, they had zero detection mechanisms. Yeah, go figure. Because of course, when we were attempting to get access to the admin VPN, we had no idea who was actually admins. So we went through maybe like 80 logins before we found an admin VPN, and of course, nobody shut us down, anything like that. So, So, the concept of continuous red teaming is something that really interests me, and it's essentially building on the idea from all the continuous network scanning that guys like Tenable are offering, the continuous application scanning that people like Veracode and White Hat and HP on Demand are offering. So it's essentially bringing in the holistic testing process that is red teaming, at least from a remote perspective, and combining that with the continuous testing processes that all of these different services and vendors offer. And it's not something that is even close to being built as of right now. We're still trying to wrap our heads around it. I just want to introduce it to all of you guys in case any of you guys, are like, hey, that is an awesome idea. I think I can build that way faster, and you just go do it. Because personally, I think there would be a lot of value in having something like this available to people. And I personally would love to have it open sourced. But essentially, continuously monitoring how an organization, the kind of press that goes out to an organization. So all the elements of open source reconnaissance. So press that drives attention from a hacker. Changes in network devices. So incorporating all of the network scanning so we can identify old patches, missing updates, changes in configuration sets, things like that. Doing this, we can evaluate risks as they come out over time. So we can, in a production environment, we can detect changes and risks, new vulnerabilities, much closer to real time as opposed to waiting for a pre-scheduled pen test to occur on, said device. So essentially, if we open this up on an entire organization and just have something churning through, an engine just churning through, we can identify things, network related issues, open source related issues, people spouting off on social media, or application related issues relative to some new application functionality that's pushed out closer to real time. Yep. Oh, no worries.
Aside from like social media and more and stuff, it's harder to really mine as well. But like the patching updates and stuff like that, how would you categorize that as something different than like just what the security engineer ops team should do?
So,
Or are you thinking for companies that don't have a security engineer ops type position?
so part of the latter, and part of the former. So it's not so much different from the existing approaches that are out there with regards to the application and network layer scanning approaches. So essentially, what the vision is combining those two things as well as the reconnaissance. So that way we get that holistic perspective. So really, what we end up with right now is, some ops person or some kind of consultant running just a network tool, or you have like Qualys, doing continuous monitoring, and all that stuff goes into one bucket that maybe one person in an organization gets to look at. Then you have another team or consultant or appliance doing application layer stuff that goes into another bucket, and only a few people have access to that. And you don't get to put any of this into the bigger picture because a lot of times these big organizations just don't talk. Network people don't want to talk to software people. Software people are like, the hell with you, network people. We're not talking to you. We're not sharing our results with you. So, this lack of communication, and then you combine that with, the open source issues, the reconnaissance-based issues. We just don't get to see that bigger picture. So it's really all about seeing the bigger picture from a remote perspective. Is the idea behind it. Yep.
Now, are you talking only about scanning or also operator, operations, basically seeing something new showed up in the environment, exploiting it, owning it?
So, so the idea was to have a continuous scanning engine. So, scanning is a good part of it, but of course that's all automated. And then also, leverage that with something, normalize all the data and create some kind of framework that we can, dashboard, create all that, or push all that information into a dashboard or, summary tables. And then on top of that, give consultants or, a red team, for instance, a platform for collaborating and, kind of consuming those results. And if they see something that's, a string that's worth tugging on, give them an avenue to, like a Cobalt Strike kind of collaborative testing environment. So bringing that 1-2 punch.
That's how you're going to monetize this, because the problem is, how do you charge the customer?
I have
from
no
one
idea.
end, and from another end is how do you account for the hours of those, because I'm trying to solve the exact same problem right now, and
So we've considered, of course, like I said, this is so far beyond, anything that's even ready to be monetized or built or, ready for rollout. It's more or less an idea. But we were thinking about like a one-time cost, well, not one time, but a recurring subscription model. So essentially, you open up your entire organization to this, and you pay by a monthly basis, and you just get reports and results and stuff, kind of populating your dashboards. You continue to pay by the month, and you just continue to get findings. But we haven't really solved that problem yet, so I don't know. That is the idea, though. So, as actually leading right into this, obviously the application and the network stuff can be very largely automated. There is automation engines behind both of these things that exist right now in very expensive appliances. So, really the idea is combining the network stuff, the application stuff, and then building on just a little bit more, and then feeding that into some other kind of collaborative testing environment, and rolling that all into one for a true continuous adversary emulation. Because really, the idea behind, getting away from the point-in-time risk reliance and the whole, why bother catchphrase is, an adversary is not just going to attack you, next week or, next Monday at noon, and then whatever is wrong at noon next Monday, that's all they're going to care about, and they're never going to look at it again until, maybe next year when your next audit comes up. They're going to be looking at you, all the time. If they really are, the true advanced persistent threat type of adversary, they're going to be looking at you, next Monday, next Tuesday, next Wednesday. They're going to be looking at you over time, and they're going to constantly be trying to find that that path of least resistance into your organization. So it's essentially trying to push the envelope, getting into that true continuous adversary emulation. And it looks like I rifled through these a little faster than I normally do. So if anyone has any other questions, feel free to let me know, or I will be around. Yes?
So Chris Nickerson said in the course of red teaming, he's had the pop shatter his orbital. Have you ever had anything go wrong or any law enforcement encounters?
Yes. Sadly, yes. So, so my one run-in with law enforcement, well, actually, so two run-ins. One actual run-in where I got dragged in. I was working for a rehab hospital doing some very physical security-driven testing, and I got cocky, and we were, as part of the deliverable, we were delivering like some training videos and all that, and we wanted to use footage from the actual test. And on several occasions that we had gotten in on previous occasions, we had, of course, equipment failures because my boss was cheap and bought cheap stuff. So this was at my old company, by the way. So it was up in someplace in New York, some remote place in New York, and so the third time I got in, we ended up having successful equipment. We were just using button cams. And when I got in, I went into the hospital as a HIPAA auditor because, you just throw around industry words and, everyone's like, oh my God, get out of his way. And so I go around and I'm like kicking people out of offices and, letting me get on their network connections and use their laptops and, just acting like an authoritative force going around the place. And one person got suspicious and of course called security, which, they in turn called the state troopers. And so I wanted to keep the contractor's badge that they gave me because it was kind of I like keeping the badges. It's like a little trophy for me. So I snuck around the back of this campus and I was like 10 feet from my car, and then a cop arrested me, and they pulled guns and threw me in the back of their car, and I had to as they handcuffed me, I had to let them reach into my pocket and grab the authorization letter that I had. So that was the whole thing. The other time we were actually working for that defense contractor with the box, and they wanted us to do some testing at their more strictly controlled engineering facilities, and of course those were not as easy to get into. And in doing that, we got in, and somebody got suspicious of us as we were coming out and called security. They immediately called the cops, and we had like a swarm of police there. We were able to get away as we just took off sprinting down the streets of San Francisco, and I ended up jumping over this thing and spraining my ankle and all this stuff, and it was a whole thing. We had to split up and duck into stores, and so that was my only two run-ins with cops. Every other time it's just been I've been in and out clean, and that was that. But so caught once because I got cocky and sprained my ankle another time. So any other questions? All right, cool. Thank you. Hope you guys enjoyed it. What's up, man?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sticking around right now. So. Yeah, we'll come later.
agents and have an intern farm and all of the employees in the office and then only like 14-hour days, promoting these systems one by one by one. Agents have to worry about doing changes to their office configuration. It's like, dude, I spent a weekend figuring out how to do that. It's like, for you, be CEOs, if you threw it out the window and send it to everything manually, it's like, very simple. Well, I'm working there because it's an addition. I'm getting more research, and I'm learning stuff. I'm doing stuff right out the window. But at least housing will get paid. I don't know. Like, for the summer, do you just stay in a nearby apartment complex? Okay, cool. And so that's usually where we're staying in the summer? That's one of the concerns things like fire eyes, air pressure. I was just past so far, but honestly, like I really enjoyed San Francisco, the Bay Area, and after I graduated from college, we could get access. Yeah, you know, it's like security and testing companies like Full Fire and but like, I'm not sure how much there is down here. Beyond just like, oh, I'm some network. Fire eyes are actually reverse engineering or something like that. Like I've been trying to do a DFIR on some file server that way. It's a strain that's not crypto, like usually crypto operations come through taking down smart boards. And this actually targets midnight on the and of course, I'm using the passwords. So this is a lot of files they can't validate. So basically, security is 339 with usernames, like generic usernames and generic passwords. Administrative password or email. When I run it, they're using it for PAM, and their password is like Jesus 50 words in the office. So it's like, you want to know what? I go through the logs, and I'm like, criminal services, is this going to have X log on it? Yeah, there was a guy who had the 3 hours straight, and it was X gold after the last year, continues to go to this log set on a whole day. And I was like, why Windows does not have like a feature to be like, hey, there's probably something wrong. Yeah, Microsoft doing log aggregation? No, I would do that. You know. So yeah, her whole file. It could be worse if you found your yes account and some other account like Joseph made a while ago. So then